welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and Ramon. You know, we have had some really amazing things happening on this planet here recently, and I don't know, it seems like the energy and the intensity has been stepped up a couple of notches. We've got you know, the people that are losing balance all over the place. We've got shootings and you know, we've got wars and rumors of wars, and you know, the political scene is just ridiculous right now. It's just ridiculous, all the shenanigans that are going on there. And we've got people that are actually beginning to, I mean, as a result of all these different things going on, partially as a result anyways, and I think there's other underlying causes for this also, but there are people that are actually waking up and starting to ask the questions, you know, what the hell's really going on here? Ramon, you had something happen just recently that really hit you to the core. What was that?
Yeah, it was actually, it floored me so bad. Yesterday morning, I received a Facebook message from a very close friend of mine from New York, and she wrote to me, "I just want to apologize for making fun of you about aliens." And I just fell to the floor in it. I was like, what happened? So I got in contact with her last night, and she didn't have any contact or anything, but she's been waking up through a friend of hers who's helped her wake up, and she was like, oh, you know, it's the awakening that's happening, and that's why I woke up. And I was just floored by it. Not because she woke up, but it really, for me, it really put in perspective that this is really happening. People are waking up and seeing things.
I told you.
Yeah. But I was like, what happened when I was telling you? She was like, I wasn't ready then. And I was like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I say this every show, the consciousness of the planet is raising. And people are really, you know, putting their minds outside the box finally, and at least popping the lid open and taking a look outside. And they're starting to realize that this isn't just a third-dimensional, you know, just mundane reality solely, that there's so much more going on here. I mean, when people are starting to look up at the sky and look at the stars and realize that there's life out there. I mean, we're not the center of the universe. The whole universe is not comprised of this little planet right here in the middle of this immense cosmos. So, yeah. Yeah,
it's very amazing.
Well, let's see. By the time this airs, I will have had my event at the DNA Crystal DNA Activation and Healing Festival at the Cove Crystal in Shelton. And Ramon, you have some interviews out there now, don't you, for your book?
Yeah, by the time this airs, they will be. I will be on Spiritual Warrior Radio and another show that I don't have up yet.
Truth Theorem Radio?
Well, that one will be
that's in August
1st. Yeah. There's another one too as well. Also, as far as news, this actually, I found this, and I think you might have heard about this, Tom, but in I always have a hard time pronouncing this country's name. Banun. Well, I have the link for it, but they have a Yeti sanctuary in this country. This country is between India and China, and right next to Nepal. And they have a Yeti sanctuary. I forgot how many square miles of reservation, and it's just amazing that they actually even did something like that. And this is a true story.
How long's this place been there?
The reservation is not that. It hasn't been around that long. they actually got a grant for $700,000 for this. So, it makes you question things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that might be a place where you want to go to, Tom.
Yeah, that whole field of cryptozoology is very interesting. There's stuff on this planet that we just, let alone, looking outside of our planet, there's stuff right here on this planet that we don't even know about, Shoot, we haven't even begun to explore the ocean. That's a whole nother story. So you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and most of our shows are on my YouTube channel. That's Tau2299 on YouTube, and Vimeo, and wherever else we happen to pop up. We have
the Pythagoras Conference coming up October 10th to the 14th, 2012. And that will be at the Horseshoe, Southern Indiana. If you're going to that and you get the tickets to us, that also helps support us. So we highly appreciate that. Also, I forgot to mention in the last few shows that we still have our 8 gig USB drive that you can pick up from us.
For all the first year and a quarter from when we started in October of 2010 through 2011. Yeah. Yeah,
and we're also coming up on 100th show, Monkey.
100th show, Monkey. Yeah, we are. We're just 5 shows off now.
Yeah.
So we'll have to do something special for that. I don't quite know yet.
Yeah. Let's bring in our guest before he falls asleep.
Okay. Dr. Robert Farrell received his Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the Ohio State University, his MBA from Western New England College, and his Doctorate of Engineering from the University of Massachusetts. He's now retired from Penn State University as an Associate Professor Emeritus. For most of his life, Dr. Farrell's been interested in ufology. 20 years ago, he began doing serious research for his science fiction series of novels, The Alien Log 2, The New World Order, and Alien Log 3, The Dulce Affair, which is coming out it may already be out, summer 2012, or coming out soon. He believes good science fiction is based on good science. To that extent, Dr. Farrell is trying to follow the style of Michael Crichton and Arthur C. Clarke in his Odyssey series. Recently, he's completed a nonfiction book, The Science Behind Alien Encounters, based on his lecture series of the same name. Dr. Farrell has lectured many times at universities, science centers, MUFON meetings, bookstores, clubs, and senior centers around the country, and has appeared on numerous TV and radio shows, including Coast to Coast with George Norrie. He and his wife divide their time between Connecticut and Arizona. His website is www.alienlog.com. Dr. Farrell, welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Wow, you've had quite a busy life, young man.
Well, yes, I have.
So, I know you say that you've been interested in ufology most of your life. Was there something that just really piqued your interest when you were growing up that got you into it?
Not really. I mean, I really can't point to any particular incident in my life that made me a believer. I think it was a gradual process that probably happened decades ago, but it was logical, as Spock would say. You know, you look up in the sky, and there's just so many stars. And today, of course, astronomers are saying there's probably more planets than there are stars in our galaxy. So just the sheer numbers makes it logical that there is other life out there. And if you do a little research, you find out that our sun is halfway through its lifespan of about 10 billion years. And there are other stars like our sun out there, billions and billions of them, and who are maybe 1 billion years older or 2 billion years older. So whatever life there is around that star is well advanced beyond our technology. and would have the ability to, travel around the galaxy and maybe even to other galaxies, but certainly around our galaxy. And so when people talk about seeing these strange craft, it makes sense that could be the machines that these advanced life forms are using. So that's kind of what the conclusion I came to decades ago. And being an engineering type, it was necessary for me to figure out how they work. And I came to a conclusion based on the evidence, and the evidence is testimony from hundreds and hundreds of people, and many of them are trained observers, astronauts, pilots, and so the data, and I can go through the data, but the data of the observations made me conclude that the only way they could do these things is to be propelling themselves with field propulsion, primarily gravity. That's the only scenario that can explain the things that these UFOs do. So they have figured out how to create gravitational fields, and they use that to propel themselves. And so I've been doing research into that area. In fact, as I was approaching retirement, I visualized that that's what I would do after I retired is to work out the physics for creating gravitational fields. But kind of a strange thing happened, and as I really got close to retirement, I had this. I felt compelled to share my knowledge on UFOs. Something I was supposed to do. And yes.
Did you find that going the fiction route gave you more freedom of expression?
Well, it does, but that's not why I went that way. I had attended a number of UFO conferences before I retired, and so as I began to formulate how I was going to write this UFO book, it became obvious to me that the people that I'm supposed to awaken, if you want to say that, are not the kind of people that would go into Barnes & Noble into their New Age section and pick up a book on UFOs. They really don't think much about UFOs. They don't give it much thought. But they would go into the fiction area and pick up an interesting-looking book on science fiction. And that's why I chose science fiction as a way to kind of educate people. And I do that through the dialogue. What my characters speak is very factual. It's as accurate as I can make it, but it's folded into an interesting story, so the reader gets hooked. But when they're done with the book, they've learned a lot. And I've even put references at the back of the book. Again, I followed Michael Crichton's lead. If you've read any of his books, he starts off with a scientific principle and builds a story around it. And he does not use footnotes because it would kind of destroy the flow of the story. So, nor did I use footnotes. But at the end of the book is our references by chapter. So if you are interested in crop circles, for instance, because my characters happen to be talking about crop circles in one of the chapters, you can go to the back of the book and find out where to do more research in that area. So that's why I chose fiction, as a way to get out the information. And I just feel it's really important that the general populace become awakened. I think that we're going to have, I don't know if you want to call it an encounter, but I believe, and there's evidence that there are more and more sightings, and more people are seeing things, and major events such as Phoenix Lights and the event over Chicago and the Stephenville event. This is happening more and more around the world, and I think they're gradually, announcing their presence.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that if people don't become desensitized to their presence, that there might be some groups that jump off a cliff or do some crazy things, Yeah. And so it's important for me to have people believe that it is a reality, that there are other life forms out there. They are more advanced than us. And at least some of them are benevolent, and the ones in my book primarily are benevolent. Of course, in my third book, which you talked about, the Alien Log 3, the Dulce Affair, I haven't really finished that. I got sidetracked in writing the nonfiction book, but I'm I'm still working on the third book, and in that book, my readers will encounter some aliens that aren't so good.
Right.
But in general, I think in general the ones that interact with us most have been here longer than us, and I subscribe to Zecharia Sitchin's work in that they probably created us. They genetically created us out of Homo erectus. And so if they created us, why would they want to destroy us? And in fact, I kind of see them as our guardian angels.
Right. Do you think
that... Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Do you think there's a concerted effort by the officials in this world to do just that, desensitize us? In what respect? You mean like our governments? You mean? Yeah, our governments. Do you think there's some concerted effort or a conscious effort to desensitize the population to the fact that there's life beyond our solar system, beyond our planet? Yeah, I don't really know. It seems like they are so set on keeping this thing a secret, the alien thing. I mean, they go to extremes and perhaps even killing people, right, to keep it a secret. And I still haven't figured out exactly why it's that important to our governments, and maybe it's not our government that's important to. Maybe it's the shadow government that is really controlling that part of it. Right. Well, it just seems like here in the last, especially more so in the last, say 20, 30 years, the whole outer space and science fiction genre and especially the Hollywood stuff, it's just gone through the roof. I mean, every other show that comes out now has something to do with aliens. Oh, even cartoons for kids. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, so maybe there's somebody there in the Hollywood area and the artist side of things that is actually trying to desensitize it.
What I love about science fiction is that it seems like science fiction is actually drawing out our future most of the time. For prime example would be shows like Star Trek. I mean, if you follow any of the shows, they have 5 different series. There's so much technology in there that we have now, or we're working on it. I think the only technology that we haven't really, at least had anything in, would be warp drive, I guess, because they're using something different. But that's right. To me, I see the sequence as being you start off with fantasy, which is really wild. And then following that, you get into the science fiction, which is more grounded in science, but it does kind of introduce some ideas as to what might be possible, scientifically possible. And that may plant seeds and get the young students who are now going into school, engineering school, or becoming scientists. They grow up on that, and now they think, well, maybe it is possible to create warp drive, and so that's what they spend their life working on. They get educated for it, and someday we'll have warp drive. I believe almost anything is possible, and as long as there's some way for someone to make money at it, I believe it'll happen, whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, just look at the cell phones, for example.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm on a Skype. And when I was growing up, I remember seeing science fiction talk about video phones, where you could talk to someone and actually see them. Right. And we have not only done that, but it's free. Who would have ever guessed that technology would be free? So what's next?
Exactly. Transporters. There's in this UFO community, there's a lot of reports of the fact that we already possess the transporter technology. I've
heard that. You have to understand what my mission is to convince the layperson that this whole UFO thing is a reality, and so I'm very careful in my books and in my lectures to not use interdimensional travel or wormholes or time travel. although I do believe it's possible to travel into the future, but you can't go back. But I try and ground everything that I talk about in science that most of the people who would be reading my books or listening to my lecture probably had in high school. I do have a little bit of, I get into some of Einstein's stuff, but it's not beyond the grasp of most people.
Okay, well, right along those lines, then, without any type of dimensional or interdimensional travel, the propulsion system, you're saying a gravitational field type propulsion. How would they traverse such great distances with that sort of propulsion system? Would it all be sublight?
Yes, probably, but very close to the speed of light. If you create a gravitational field propulsion system versus the impulse system that we use today, chemical rockets or ion rockets, whatever, those are all impulse devices.
Right.
And we're never going to escape our solar system with that kind of propulsion system. But if you get into gravitational propulsion system, what that allows you to do is to accelerate at extremely high rates. UFOs have been clocked at 100 G accelerations by different methods, and that's, they could do maybe more than 100. I don't know why they'd even be limited to 100. And people don't understand. Well, how does having gravitational propulsion allow you to do that? And I give a little kind of a thought experiment in my lecture and in my book. And if you don't mind, I'll give it right now.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, what I do is I have someone in the audience volunteer to climb up into the nose cone of my rocket that I have projected on the screen, and I give them a walkie-talkie, and I light the fuse, and off they go. And so we're communicating back and forth. And I ask him, I say, well, now what's happening? And, of course, the rocket ship is accelerating. And he says, well, my G meter says I'm accelerating at 4 Gs, and I'm being kind of pulled down in my couch. I can hardly move. So off he goes, and I'm watching, and all of a sudden the flames start sputtering, and the flames go out. So he's coasting upward. So I ask him, okay, now what's happening? And he says, well, I'm kind of floating now, and my G meter says 0 Gs, and I'm just floating. And I'm watching him, and he gets all the way up to the top of his trajectory, and then he starts coming down. And so I ask him again, what's happening? And he says, well, I'm still floating, and my G meter says 0 Gs. See, he's free falling. So I said, well, if we did this experiment on Jupiter, you would be actually accelerating toward the planet at perhaps 40 Gs. And if it was an even bigger planet, it could be 100 Gs. But you wouldn't even notice it. You would have no sensation of acceleration because you free fall into that field. Or if you create a negative field, which I think they actually do, is they use a negative field, you would free fall away from it. And whatever way you point that field, you free fall away from that field. Or if you're using a positive field, you would free fall toward that field. So if you're driving along in this UFO and you turn the steering wheel to the right, basically you're pointing the gravitational field to the right, and you make a sharp turn to the right, but you have no sensation of making that turn because you're free falling in whatever direction you point your field. So if you have this ability then to accelerate at 100 Gs, first of all, you could get to the moon in 20 minutes. You could get to Mars in 12 hours, and Jupiter in about 8 hours. And so you wouldn't have any problems with zero gravity. Right now they're concerned with extended periods of time at zero gravity. People get it has bad effects on their body. You probably know that.
Right.
Some of these astronauts that have been up almost half a year or so, they have problems when they come back. Their eyes, some of them have really bad problems with their eyes. Of course, their bones. Well, you wouldn't have that problem if you could get to Mars in 12 hours. It would be almost like going up to the space station and spending the day and then coming back. So that's one of the advantages of gravity drive. If you kept on going at 100 Gs, then you begin to reach speeds where time dilation kicks in. And you could travel out to it's about 40 light years out to Zeta 1-2 Reticuli. That's about 39 or 40 light years away. And the people aboard the craft, by the time they got to Zeta Reticuli, would think they'd only been traveling about a month, but yet they've been gone 40 years, according to here on Earth. And if they turn around and come back, to them, they've been on a 2-month trip, they land on the planet, and everybody around them is aged 80 years. So they actually went into the future 80 years. That's how you can time travel. But so if the UFOs have this ability to accelerate in 100 Gs, then it's not a problem for them to come from Zeta Reticuli. A month is probably not a big deal for them because they may live to be thousands of years old, so they don't have the same sense of urgency time-wise. So they can come to this planet and they can abduct Betty and Barney Hill and do whatever they want with them, and then drop them off and go on to someplace else. It's not a problem. But it all hinges on the gravity drive. And so that's the key. So I've been searching, well, how do you create this gravitational field? That's the big question. But believe it or not, people are doing it today in laboratories.
Yeah, I was going to recommend a book by a guy named Paul Potter. He really goes into the science of how he thinks it's created. But one of the things I've heard is it like a downhill effect? That's what I hear. That like they create like a downhill effect in front of the ship, and that's why it's able to move like almost like it's going down the hill and accelerate.
Yeah, but that's basically if you have a gravitational field that you're falling into or away from. Some people think of space as gravity is bending space. I mean, you could think of it that way if you want to. I don't know. I mean, but it has that effect. The gravitational field is like creating a dimple, and you kind of fall into it or fall away from it if you have a negative field. Now, the reason I think they actually create negative fields is because some of the things that people have seen them do. For instance, in fact, there's a sequence of photographs that appeared in a book that was published by Richard Brunswick. It's a series, and I think it's a German book. But he has a two photo sequence of a UFO over a field, and you can see it's kicking up dust, and the dust is circulating around the UFO. But if you look at it, you can see right underneath the UFO, and it is a saucer-shaped UFO. But so underneath it is an annular area where it seems like there's not much dust. It's been excluded. And so if you were propelling yourself with a negative field, and you create that under the craft because you want it to push you away, it would also be expelling whatever is underneath it, including the air. So you'd have a low pressure region under there, but any dust that goes in there, because there's a circulation, would be excluded. And that might explain another phenomenon that people see. There's been at least 1 or 2 instances where UFOs that have been hovering over a shallow body of water for an extended period of time, when they leave, the water is frozen. So how do you explain that? Well, if they have a negative field under the craft, then it's creating a low-pressure region under that craft because it's expelling everything. And you all know what happens to water as you reduce the pressure over it. It evaporates faster and faster, and if it were in space, it'd probably even boil. So that evaporation is carrying heat away from the water, from the pond beneath it. And if it happens long enough, there's enough heat carried away from the pond water that the temperature will drop to the point where it might freeze. And so that's an example of kind of proof that they're using negative propulsion. And also, if people see these things going at thousands of miles an hour, and they don't appear to create any shock wave, and so somehow they are forewarning the molecules ahead of their craft, in a way other than the pressure signal that we use on our aircraft. Our aircraft, as they go faster and faster, the pressure builds up in front of the craft. And you can think of it as signaling, that the higher pressure is kind of a signal for the molecules downstream to start getting out of the way. But the problem is when you reach the speed of sound, that signal can't go ahead of the craft anymore, and you get a shock wave. But if you had some other way to warn the molecules that this craft is coming, in a way that travels faster than sound, maybe even the speed of light, then you can kind of ease the molecules out of the way, and you won't create a shock wave, and you get what aerodynamicists call pure rotation or flow around the craft, potential flow, excuse me. So you have much less friction. It's much easier to go at high speeds compared to what our craft have to deal with. So that would be a negative field probably that would do that. Now, it may be that you could also do it with a negative electric field too, and I think they've been experimenting with that. But a negative gravitational field would also do it.
So,
and I'm sorry.
So gravity itself is kind of been an anomaly through the sciences, as far as somebody really being able to explain just what gravity is.
Yes.
Have you got a theory there?
No, I don't know what gravity is. There's theories. I think a lot of the researchers are thinking in terms of gravitons. And, they're dealing with a particle, just like a photon, but it's a graviton that somehow exchanges force. So there's a Higgs field that they think there's a thing called a Higgs field. And in fact, they thought they discovered the Higgs particle, but it hasn't been proved yet. The Higgs particle supposedly is the mediator for creating a mass to give another particle properties of mass and momentum. They haven't proven that yet. So I guess right now I kind of follow the idea of a graviton, and a positive graviton and a negative graviton. Paul Dirac, back in 1928, proved that for every particle there's an antiparticle. So if you think of a graviton as a particle, then there's got to be an antigraviton, which would create a negative gravitational force. And the work that is being done right now by Eugene Podkletnov over in Finland at the Temper Institute of Technology, he's actually generating gravitational pulses. And they are, I believe, they're a negative field just because of what they do. He's able to bend plates with them, steel plate. This pulse will hit it and it'll bend it. Well, that's not a positive pulse. That's a negative field, in my opinion.
Now, what type of a pulse is this?
It's a gravitational field. It's a pulse of gravity.
Huh.
It's a beam of gravity that he projects out of his apparatus, and it's almost like it's collated. It's like a laser. Think of it like a laser beam, but it's a gravitational field pulse. It's very short duration, but he's clocked the speed to be 64 times the speed of light. He's actually measured that, and what's that?
How do you? I mean, I can understand measuring maybe even up to the speed of light, but measuring beyond that kind of boggles my mind.
Well, what he's done is he has two force transducers that are separated by 1,200 meters, and he also has atomic clocks that can time to that precision, so that he can actually measure the time difference as the pulse hits one and then bounces over to the other, and it's something like 93 nanoseconds to travel that 1,200 meters, and if you do the math, it comes out to be 64 times the speed of light.
Wow!
So, in fact, in my third novel, I'm going to make use of that, because one of my characters is having a discussion with the aliens, because the good aliens are concerned about what the bad aliens are going to do, and there's this Galactic Federation, you see, who has rules. However, the distances are pretty great, and the center of the Galactic Federation is many light years away. So the question is, well, how do the good guys relay this information back to the Federation and say, hey, there's some bad guys here doing some bad things, you know, what do you want us to do about it? Well, so how long does it take to communicate when you're trying to, let's say, go, maybe not 1,000 light years, but 100 light years? Maybe the seat of the government, if you would, is 100 light years away. Well, if you can communicate, let's say you use a carrier beam that is a gravity beam, a gravity pulse that travels 64 times the speed of light, and that's your carrier beam. And that's kind of what I'm proposing in my book is they're going to say, well, we use a gravity pulse as our carrier beam, and we can send information that way, and that way, instead of taking 100 years, it only takes a couple years. But meanwhile, we're allowed to act somewhat autonomous because of this communication problem, and we're going to take care of this problem with these bad guys. So anyway, so I'm going to use that little bit of information in my third book. And I like to do that in every one of my books, kind of push the envelope a little bit as far as science and explore some different things with my aliens.
That's got to be fun.
It is. It's fun. In fact, I have a very good friend who, when I'm in Arizona, he lives close to where I live, and he's come up with an alternative theory to the Big Bang. And I'm a supporter. I call myself his disciple. But I even folded his theory into my second book, because in my second book, one of my characters, and I have the same characters throughout the whole series, but one of them, he's an astrophysicist, and he accidentally gets abducted. So, you know, he asked Quellen, his abductor, all kinds of questions, because Quellen will answer any question, since he knows he can kind of blank out his memory before he lets him go. Well, the astrophysicist, his first question is, are we on the right track with the Big Bang Theory? And he finds out through Quellen that we're not. That's the wrong theory. And he finds out what the correct theory is. And it's basically the theory of a friend of mine. His theory makes so much more sense than the Big Bang Theory. That, in fact, he and I right now are collaborating on a nonfiction book in astronomy, where the first part is a little history of astronomy, and we get into a discussion of the Big Bang, and then we offer his theory as an alternative using the same data.
Are we able to elaborate any on his theory?
I can, yes.
That would be wonderful. I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, well, he's created some very clever analogies in his theory that makes it a little easier to visualize this thing. First of all, you understand the Big Bang Theory. Supposedly everything started from a singularity, and that turns me off right off the bat, because my whole education that I've had in math and engineering, they always told me avoid singularities, right? If you got a singularity, you did something wrong. When here they are with the Big Bang, they start off with a singularity. So that's one big strike against them. But and the other thing now, they have this, they've measured the velocity of these galactic clusters that are way out there, you know, like 10, 12 billion light years away. And that was no small task, to actually measure the speed of these things as they move away from us and know how far out they are at the same time. But they have determined that indeed, the further out these galactic clusters are, the faster they're going. So if you subscribe to the Big Bang Theory, you're almost forced to conclude that these things are accelerating, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, kind of how else could that happen other than they got to be accelerating? Well, if you subscribe to Bobby McGee's model, in his model, the universe already started off with a structure and with matter. It didn't start from a singularity. It consists of a three-dimensional matrix, if you would, a lattice that extends out to infinity in all directions. And at the lattice point, now he picked positronium as the possible atom, if you would, because that's the simplest atom there is a positronium atom. Consists of a positron and an electron. And you know when they come together, they annihilate each other, and you get pure energy. You get 2 gamma rays usually. So here you have this very stable lattice of positronium. Everything is in phase, and it's at 0 degrees, basically. and it's very stable under those conditions. But something happens, call it the finger of God, but one of those positroniums is disturbed, and it annihilates, sending off 2 gamma rays. They fly off and they hit 2 more positroniums, and from those 2 you get 4 gamma rays, and so on. You get a chain reaction, right?
Right.
So you can imagine this like an explosion. And in fact, his analogy would be if you have a room filled with methane and oxygen, and it's a very strong room, and you have a little porthole that you can look through with a camera, and you can film the event that occurs inside this room when you light a spark in the center of the room. And so you film this explosion, you can imagine, and then you play it back in slow motion, so you can actually see this fireball expanding outward, okay, and it's bright, of course, and it goes all the way out and completes its thing. Well, that's what's happening in the universe even today. Is this explosion? This is going out near the light speed, and it's still traveling. And just as in this room of methane and oxygen, if you weighed all the molecules in that room, and you wrote down the weight, and then you shot off this spark, and after the explosion, you weighed all the things that were left over, the weight would be the same. All you did is convert the matter from one form to another. And so that's what happens with Bobby's model, is this deflagration wave that's traveling outward. It's part of that big explosion. It has a certain thickness to it. As a matter of fact, it's a couple billion light years thick. And, of course, at the leading edge, it's traveling near the speed of light, and it's carrying out this chain reaction that continues outward. But behind that, time-wise, with time, some of these gamma rays and photons, if you would, convert back into matter. That can happen. It can go either way. And the probability is that you get the photons, but eventually you're going to get matter, and it's traveling behind this wavefront. And the matter is starting to agglomerate because it's traveling near light speed. It has enhanced gravity, and so it will agglomerate much faster than you might think, forming larger particles, and eventually atoms, and eventually molecules, and eventually dust. And pretty soon, as it's doing this, it's no longer having this linear velocity that it started off with, but it's starting to swirl and get angular momentum as the collisions occur off-center and things start spinning. And so as you convert the linear momentum to angular momentum with time, the further in you come toward us, where we're sitting at the center of this explosion, the closer you come to us, the more of that matter that's being created is changing from linear momentum to angular momentum, okay? So here's another analogy that he gives. He's standing on the corner, and a potato truck drives by, and potatoes are falling off the truck. And he just happens to have his little radar gun in his pocket, so he pulls out the radar gun, and he sees the truck now. It's down the road about 3 blocks. It's traveling 30 miles an hour, and he shoots the potatoes as they fall off the truck, and he writes down a number, 30 miles an hour. And then he shoots the potatoes a little closer that are bouncing on the road, and he finds out, those potatoes are only traveling 25 miles an hour, and they're 2.5 blocks away, so he writes that down. And then the ones even closer are traveling slower, because, as potatoes bounce, they convert linear momentum to angular momentum, and they go slower. So he has this graph of data, and he hands it to someone and says, look at this. I have this graph. And these things are traveling, the further out they are, the faster they're going. What do you think of that? And someone who would not know what the data represents would say, oh, it looks like they might be accelerating, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what astronomers think are happening to these galactic clusters. They're accelerating. If you look at Bobby's model, those galactic clusters, the ones that are further out, are closer to the deflagration wave that's traveling at nearest light speed, and with time things have agglomerated and slowed down and become stars and galaxies. But that whole process is converting linear momentum to angular momentum and causing them to slow down. And so that doesn't violate any physics principles. In fact, it's a conservation of energy principle.
Right.
Another thing about Bobby's model is if you know thermodynamics, one of the laws of thermodynamics says that entropy will always increase. And they're talking about the universe entropy. Entropy is a measure of disorder. So the more entropy you have, the more disorder. Well, in his model, the universe in its initial state is at the lowest entropy level because it's completely structured and ordered. And then all of a sudden this deflagration happens and things become chaotic. And so the entropy is increasing with time. It's a natural process. So everything that about his model fits with the physics that we know. We don't have to have a singularity. We're not searching for this magical, mythical, dark energy that they need to find in order to figure out what makes the universe accelerate. Because really the universe is not accelerating, as I explained, and so you don't need to look for this dark energy because you're never going to find it. It doesn't exist.
Right.
So
right.
With that model,
there probably is dark matter.
With that model, I kind of see like if we were to go in front of that wave, I almost feel like there's nothing there, and once that wave passes, it's almost like creating the universe kind of thing.
Well, okay, we have to define the universe. We have what I call a primordial universe, and that is the universe that has this lattice structure, and it goes out to infinity. So if we somehow jumped ahead of this deflagration wave, we would be in the middle of this lattice structure that extends out to infinity. And as long as we didn't disturb these positronium atoms, we could just sit there and observe, and we'd say, wow, aren't these pretty? They're all in a nice little lattice point about 6 inches apart, and it's very quiet and stable. And all of a sudden, bang, this wave hits us, and now we're in a different universe. We're in the universe that we can see, except the deflagration wave is beyond what we can see at this point.
Right.
We can only see out about 12, 13 billion light years. This way, the light that we are looking at now is coming from, or came from a star or cluster that was at that point 13 billion years ago. Beyond that, we can't see beyond that. But the wave is out there traveling. But just remember, initially, for about 2 billion years, that wave front, it has a certain thickness, and a lot of things are happening inside of that. And you may not have any stars form yet. Stars may not form until they reach the tail end, the closest point toward us, of that deflagration wave, where you actually get stars forming. And so, and by the time that light gets to us, that's going to be 30 billion years from now.
Right, and if that leading edge is traveling at or near the speed of light,
right?
Yeah, it'll take a very, very long time, or if we would ever have the potential to see that leading edge from our perspective.
Yeah, I don't know how you could, because whatever it's creating is traveling toward us at the speed of light as it's moving away at the near speed of light. So
right.
We're never going to see it. And who's to say there was only one initiation point?
Exactly.
Maybe you can imagine you ever see how bubbles kind of, when you have a bubble and then another bubble and they intersect each other, you get this flat plane in between. And if you have a lot of bubbles at every intersection, they're all flat planes. Well, we might find that there's other bubbles out there. There's other universes that are expanding toward us, and at some point there's this, I don't know what it looks like, but there would be this flat point where the two different universes have come together. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I'll leave that for somebody else to figure out.
Yeah.
But I think his theory is so simple, and there's this thing called Occam's razor. Yeah, you're familiar with that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. Usually the simplest explanation is the best, and his is by far the simplest.
Yeah. That you explained it quite well, and I was able to get the picture in my head. I think I pretty accurately understand that theory. So,
Yeah.
very interesting. Very interesting. So, have you? Where do you stand on quantum physics?
I don't know too much about quantum physics. I mean, I know what the layperson knows, but that's about it. And I don't know, where it ends. You get quarks, and what is there a subquark out there, or is quark the end? I don't know. I really haven't studied quantum physics too much. It's interesting.
I think you have quantas now after quarks. Is that right?
Yeah, what?
Quantas?
It could be. I don't know. But I wrote a paper on gravity drive, and I blogged it, basically, and someone read it. And so happens he's a very bright person. I don't know what he does for a living. I think he works for the government doing some secret stuff. But he and a friend of his, and by the way, he's Romanian. He came from Romania, but he works in Maryland for the government, I think, or a company that does government contracting. But he and a friend of his who is in Romania now, actually developed a theory, a proposal for creating a craft that would be propelled by gravitational field. And they presented a paper. It was peer-reviewed, and it was presented at a joint conference on propulsion. And it was at AIAA, if you know what that is. That's the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, jointly with AIEE, it's the electrical engineering guys, and SME, and I think ASME, I'm not sure, but all these engineering groups had a joint conference on propulsion in 2007 outside of Dayton, Ohio, and they presented a paper. It was peer-reviewed and published and presented, and they showed this concept of how that you could build a craft that could create a gravitational field for propulsion. And so, and their theory, their approach is if you create these panels, reflective panels, and you space them half a wavelength apart, depending on what type of energy you're using, whether it's microwave or visual light or whatever, that would fix the spacing. In fact, if you're using very high frequency wavelengths, like visual light, we'd be talking nanotechnology in order to construct these. But anyway, so you have these plates, and so you're piping these photons between these plates, and they're bouncing back and forth because they're reflective plates. And every time the photons change direction, they release a graviton. And, of course, they also slow down because they're giving up energy. So now these gravitons are creating this gravitational field. And so you have a series of these plates that you build this craft with, and you turn on one or the other, or two or three, however you want, in order to create and vector the force in the direction that you want to go in. This is a very serious paper that was presented by these gentlemen. But one of the gentlemen, the one who's in the States, also wrote a book, and he was talking about, you talk about quantum physics. He actually pointed out that there is an error in the fundamental equations of the quantum physics. And the error is, physicists usually start off with an energy balance. And so you start listing, you have the total energy of the system is equal to the potential energy plus the kinetic energy plus the internal energy. Those three things represent the total energy of a system. Well, the quantum physicists left out the internal energy. And it would make sense that you would, because you're thinking of a particle, and you wouldn't think that it would have any internal energy. But they left it out. And he maintains that had they left it in, that it might be possible to actually combine quantum physics with classical physics and bridge that gap. So, like I said, he's a very bright guy.
Wow.
It's interesting.
But that's as much as I know about quantum physics.
Well, let's see. Well, we're actually...
getting...
What's that, Ramon?
No, I was going to say we're at the top of the hour. I want to give him a chance to say where we can find his books, where you're speaking next.
Yes. Well, actually, right now I'm kind of on vacation in Connecticut, so I have no speaking engagements other than on the radio from time to time. But anybody that wants to get my books, beginning in January of this year, I now offer all my books as ebooks as well as paper books. But the simplest way to get my book is to go to my website, which you mentioned, www.alienlog, that's one word, .com, excuse me, and you'll find a tab there on how to get the books. Excuse me, and you go to that page, and you can select, if you want to go to Amazon, click on Amazon, and it takes you right to Amazon where you have a choice of an ebook or a paper book, or you can go to Barnes & Noble, and either one. Or you could download an order form, excuse me, and send it to me, and I'll send you an autographed copy.
Huh, there you go.
Oh, cool. So, any dates on Alien Log 3, or?
Well, as you'd mentioned, I really had hoped to have it out this summer, but I decided to write the nonfiction book called The Science Behind Alien Encounters. I'd given a lecture probably at least 50 times around the country. It's a PowerPoint lecture. Normally it's 2 hours, although for MUFON I gave a 3-hour version. And people are enthralled by it. And so I thought, well, why don't I can that and make it into a book? That's what I did. So that kind of got me off track as far as finishing the third book. And now I'm working with Bobby McGehee, and we're about halfway through with a joint book on on how the universe began. And it goes into a little more extensive explanation than what I gave you. And plus, we're tailoring that book, so it might be a book that a professor might tell students that they should do outside reading with this book in Astronomy 101, maybe, because we give the whole history of astronomy going all the way back to Copernicus, and we show milestones where the the vision of what the universe is changes. You know, originally we had a geocentric universe back with Copernicus, and then we get to, before him, and then he had this heliocentric idea where the center of the universe is the sun. And then for a long time, up till about the mid-20s, 1920s, we thought the Milky Way was the universe, and someplace in there was the center of it, but the whole universe was basically the Milky Way. And it wasn't until around 1928 or so that we finally discovered that there are galaxies that are beyond the Milky Way, and therefore island universes, and it goes on and on.
Yeah. Great. That sounds interesting in itself. Okay, well, we're going to take ourselves a little break here, and we will come back to the members section, and it's very simple to become a member. We want to thank all our members for being just that, because you make this show possible. Just follow the links on the page, and it'll get you to that second hour.
Yeah, and if you guys become a member, just remember that you help support the show and bring guests like the ones we have on and get this information out there.
Absolutely. All right, well, condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
The love you deny is the pain you carry.
And we'll see you in the second hour.